national webinar. And as soon as she is able, she will be joining us. And if not, I can punt and we'll make it through the day together. All right, so as we did yesterday, I want to take just a moment to ground ourselves in the promise of community action. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, excuse me, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. And we're really going to be leaning today into that people part of community action. Some of the categories that we're going to be diving into will focus on our customers, they will focus on our partners, as well as our internal customers as well, the folks who actually work in our organization. So we're going to take a lot of time talking about the people part of the promise, but we're also going to look at some numbers and some data and things like that. So here we go. All right. So first thing I wanted to do, though, is if we could just talk a little bit about yesterday. Let's think about yesterday. If you would, either come off mute, come on camera, all of the above, or at least pop in the chat one takeaway from yesterday or one thought, one word that would describe your experience with us yesterday. Or if at 3 o'clock you woke up and you have a question, put that in the chat as well, and we'll kind of get things going that way. Anybody want to come off mute? You guys are going to have to be nice to me because I'm here by myself. I don't have Mary Beth to play off of.
I'll come off mute.
Thank you, Michelle.
I just, number one, I appreciate the knowledge sharing and the networking from yesterday, but I really was struck by the reminder that, in times of uncertainty, that kind of solid foundation and focus on purpose and planning with purpose is so important. And I think sometimes when people feel uncertain, they tend to kind of flounder, not sure where to put their attention. And I just think it's a great reminder that the org standards are a way that can kind of keep us grounded.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Michelle. I see some comments in the chat as well. I didn't miss you, Tim. I saw you come on camera. I'll be right back. The importance of board engagement. Thank you for bringing that forward, Jenny. Barbara says best financial practices are important. Yes. Rich appreciated the oversight of the board in financial areas, and Kay says the background of the standards and how they came about, right? I think sometimes we can just assume, those of us who've been around for a while, we just assume, oh yeah, those have been around since the aughts or whatever. And so we forget that not everybody's been around that long, and sometimes we need to be reminded. I'm going to pick on you just for a second, Tim, because you came on camera. Did you want to add something? If not, just stay off camera and I'll ignore you. Okay. All right. So let's move into our discussion for today. Let's talk about some what we call maybe difficult standards. Not all standards are created equal. And of course, different organizations operate differently. And so what's going to be hard for one may not be so hard for the other. What's going to be easy for one may not be so easy for the other. But some of the things that we've seen over time that can make a standard seem difficult are those dependencies, right? So we talked about yesterday, how are these standards linked to each other? And so sometimes the not meeting one standard will lead to an inability or difficulty in meeting another standard, right? Because they're dependent upon each other. As Mary Beth mentioned yesterday, and as we made sure that we included in our discussion of each of the categories, documentation, 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 right? And that kind of seems like a no-brainer. Of course we need documentation, but the key is to make sure that we are gathering and providing to our state CSBG office the proper documentation, the agreed upon documentation that demonstrates that we are meeting a particular organizational standard. So it's not, it's not enough to say, well, we kind of sort of have this other thing over here. When the state CSBG office has said what we need to see is a spreadsheet with these columns, or we need to see a screenshot of your scorecard, or whatever the situation might be. We want to make sure that we're really focusing on documentation and providing the documentation that the state has requested. And then, of course, depth of knowledge. And you guys kind of hit on that as we started. How much does staff know? How much do our program managers know about the organizational standards, the history, and mostly the importance of the organizational standards? So we want to make sure that we're, doing things like this and just having the opportunity to really increase our depth of knowledge. I would hope that there's some utility in these recordings later, and you guys may pull them and say, hey, let's sit down and let's hear what Terry and Mary Beth had to say about category 7 or 8 or whichever. And, share this with folks who weren't able to be with us. That would be our hope in terms of building that depth of knowledge. As always, we want to remind you that we want to really drill down and focus on what does each standard require, right? And so we have put together some guidebooks that will go category by category and provide some insight in terms of, kind of what is the intent and what might meeting that particular standard look like. Again, deferring, of course, to state guidance in terms of the exact requirements for each of you. So these are available at the NCAP website, and we will provide links to all of that later. And so really what we're doing with organizational standards is we are just taking a snapshot, right? They're either met or they're not, so there's no E for effort, right? And so you really just want to be honest. Just do an honest assessment of where you are so that you can decide what you need to do next. And again, it may not be possible to achieve 100% every year. It'd be great. But when you do not, take some time and take a look at that and figure out, how do we avoid this next time? What do we need to change in terms of processes? What do we need to change in terms of responsibility assignments? What do we need to change in terms of the way we keep or store documentation? So think about those things as you assess the standards each year, and you will automatically strengthen your processes by going back and really examining why you did not meet a particular standard. Focus on documentation in advance, right? When I was at a local agency, the thing that I felt most frustration with as I moved from frontline into management is I thought management had it all together, right? I thought they kept all of the reports and they kept all of the documentation and all the data I was entering into that computer. Somebody was dealing with it. So we need to make sure that that's actually happening, right? We need to make sure that we have our processes in place. And some of you talked about, well, we have a folder where we go in and we update and we, upload the new documentation. That's great. Write it down that that's your procedure. Write down that this is, the guidance from the state, and make sure that the documentation clearly links to that standard and that it's clear how it links to that standard. And then make sure that everybody who needs to know knows where that documentation is kept, where it's stored. If you get stuck, there are lifelines available. One of the places that I think you can turn most readily is to your state association. They are most likely to be hearing from other agencies where there are difficulties, right? So you may reach out to the state, to WISCAP, and say, hey, we're kind of having trouble with this particular standard. And they may say, you know, we've heard from two or three other, so we're putting together a training with our state CSBG office to address these issues. So reach out to your state association, reach out to your fellow community action agencies, and maybe have those conversations and say, hey, are you guys experiencing this as well? And of course, your state office. The state office has resources available. They have, you know, they're called different grants managers or monitors, whatever they may be called in your state. They have expertise as well. And, you know, we're partners with them. And so reaching out to them can be very, very helpful and can, again, help everybody to be on the same page. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not point to myself and the rest of the folks at NCAP. We stand ready to help you at any time. And I'm going to go ahead and toss, whether they know it or not, I'm going to toss CAP Law in as well as a lifeline, because they are, again, a perfect resource. Well, I kind of beat this slide up already. So if a standard is really difficult for everybody, talking to your state office is the way to go. There may be, again, that opportunity for TNTA, or it may be that if you did not meet a particular standard, there's some specific training that's available. There may be a curing period in your state. Some states do, some states do not, where they say, well, if you can, you know, clear this up within the next 30 days, or if you can provide additional documentation, then we will reevaluate that. But again, have that conversation with your state CSBG office to understand exactly how they can support, because they do want you to be successful. And then again, as we're thinking about, you know, where we have the opportunity for improvements, take those pain points and really turn them into opportunities. Ask things like, how can we improve? What lessons have we learned in going from not meeting a standard to meeting a standard? What changes can we implement now so that the next time we assess ourselves, we are in a better place to actually meet these standards? And then, of course, follow up. So what we're really talking about is the plan, do, study, act cycle, or what we call continuous quality improvement in community action and other industries as well. And it's core to what we are doing. It's, you know, we've talked a lot about the organizational standards being about compliance, and that ideally our agencies are really moving towards excellence. And it's by the development and implementation of continuous quality improvement processes that our agencies have the structure and the momentum, can build the momentum towards becoming agencies of excellence. So it is a cycle where you examine your results and then think, how can we improve? Test it out, measure your impact, and then say again, did we move the needle? Did we make the change that we wanted to? And so I am happy to get up on that soapbox and talk for hours at any time you would like to invite me to. All right. Some of the things that we see are common pitfalls, right? One of the reasons that we talk about, you know, what is the interpretation or what is the intent of a standard is because that interpretation can trip us up, right? So we want to make sure, again, that we have that clarity across our organization, as well as between us and our state CSBG office, that the interpretation of the standards is similar or matching. Documentation, I'll just say it 10 million times today. Real focus on the board standards, right? Because the boards are first of all, very comprehensive, a lot of standards that our boards are involved in. And it's important to understand when they need to review something, when they need to take a particular action, when they need to accept something, when they need to adopt something. So again, the board standards really require additional focus and just a continuous eyes on making sure that we are putting the proper things before the board in time for them to understand and really digest the information and be ready when they need to take the right steps, which is timing, right? And then also, sometimes I think we can get kind of tunnel vision about the CSBG standards and organizational standards. And so we think, well, that is our CSBG reporting person's stuff. But really, whoever is primarily responsible for pulling all of this together, they have to have access to folks across your organization. They need to have access to data across your organization or access to the people who have access to that data. And so it's really important that you establish a culture of working across teams when it comes to any kind of organizational assessment. Today, we're talking about organizational standards, but if you're in Pathways to Excellence or other types of programs where you're looking across programs, it's important that everybody has that buy-in and that they understand, oh God, here comes Terry. She wants all my data again, that they understand why. How about you guys? Have you experienced anything at your agency in terms of some pitfalls with the org standards that I didn't hit on? Let's see, Michelle, when did you put that there? Being disorganized, lack of planning, siloing. Yes, thank you, Michelle. Boy, we're going to have to bring you on board, Michelle. You could be a co-trainer on these. All right, so, you know what? I didn't do this yet, but I'm going to try to do this on the fly. Let me talk a little bit about what I hope to do, and then we will hopefully do it. Let's see. I'm hoping to put you guys in some breakout rooms. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put this on the next slide so guys can be reading these while I'm getting that ready. I'm going to try to send you guys into some breakout rooms if I can find my settings here. And then we are going to ask you to take a look at these, one of these standards, and identify a couple of ways that the Community Action Agency could deal with this particular standard, which is considered to be a difficult standard. And I don't know where Sabrina, can you help me with setting up some breakout rooms? I am not seeing it in my choices.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be Tom because I'm not a host in this one.
Oh, I see. Well, you know what? Let's just do this together. It's okay. Let's just do it together. All right, but I need you guys to come off mute because I know if I put you all in small rooms, you would be talking to each other. So let's pretend that there's only
four. I can do it if you'd like me, Terry.
Pardon?
I can do the breakouts. I've got it popped up right now. If you how many people per breakout room would you like? Or like
4 rooms, random assignments?
Can do.
Okay. All right. If you wind up in room 1 or 2, please think about standard 6.4 and how the CAA could deal with this standard. And if you wind up in room 3 or 4, please take a look at 7.4 and think about how the CAA could deal with having not met this particular standard. And so whenever those rooms are ready, we will be ready to go. We'll take about 5 or 6 minutes in the rooms and then come out, and I'm going to ask somebody from each group, from each room, to please report out.
Okay, I'm going to create those rooms right now.
Awesome.
All right, here we go.
And if you have trouble getting into a room, just let us know.
I believe they are all in the room.
We're getting there. Am I a co-host, Tom?
I can make you one quick.
That'd be all right. Still see a few folks in here. Are you perhaps away from your desk or don't want to go or need help getting to a room? All right. One more's gone. All right. See, Anna, I am not sure. I almost know who the last name Erickson is. What is that? What is your name? Nope, not at the desk. Okay. All right. Well, if you don't, oh, all right. Slowly but surely, here we go. We're down to 2. All right. Now, let me start my timer here. All right, we may have folks start coming back a little early, but we've got about 30 seconds left. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. Let's let everybody's room get closed. About 20 more seconds. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you are seeing the slide that says activity scenarios at the top. Things can get a little wonky after we go into breakout rooms. Good, thank you. All right, lots of thumbs up. I could tell you guys are having a good time in there talking. So who got forced into the horrible position of having to speak out for room 1?
Oh, I think I think I was room 1. I forgot already. This is Jenny. So we had 4 people in our group, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
we
you
had
guys
standard 6.4 that we talked about. And it sounds like really everybody sort of just does whatever they can do throughout the year to gain consumer satisfaction. So they try everything. We have people that we translate different languages. We do electronic surveys. We do paper surveys. Every way possible, we try to get that satisfaction information back. And it's not just on a community needs assessment year, is what I understood from everybody. It's every year, always analyzing, always looking.
Okay, so in what I'm hearing is that you guys were sharing what you guys do, and so which of those does this agency need to adopt? So if the agency was assessed as not met on 6.4, did you guys talk about what would they do specifically to make sure that they're going to meet this next year?
Well, we didn't specifically talk about it because everybody sort of feel like they met it. So, but if you didn't meet it, I mean, it sounds like everybody understood that they would just need to try different techniques to capture data, whether it's emails, electronics, meeting the people where they're at. The language barrier sometimes is why you're not getting it. So it sounded like in our group that everybody pretty much adapted to their region.
Okay. All right.
To make sure that they met it.
I think that what I'm hearing is that you guys don't experience this as a difficult standard.
We did not.
Good. In the scenario here, I think the thing that we would want to really address with this particular agency is that, you mentioned that customer satisfaction data is from across the agency, but they don't include it in their community assessment or their strategic planning processes. So that's why in this particular scenario, the state said, you're not meeting this standard. So they would just need to fold their processes into the community assessment or the strategic planning process. And I may have stomped all over the room 2 folks who also looked at 6.4. Who wants to share from the room 2 folks? And thank you, Jenny, by the way. Room 2. Is that you, Kay?
Yeah, I can talk to this a little bit. Well, we understood it that we both the organization, we had DCF in our group, so they aren't an agency per se, and then we had Sabrina in our group, so that she's from the association, but we also had a rep from AdvoCap, and talked about the fact that we both, we collect this information routinely anyway. It's supposed to be reported to the board, or in our case, the advisory committee, because we're a limited purpose agency.
Okay.
But to actually put it into the community needs assessment, if it wasn't done and if the agency had not met this, a simple request to the state agency to say, hey, can we make a revision to our community needs assessment? And hopefully that would then change that to met.
The next time. Yeah. All right. Great, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in? Okay, how about someone who looked at 7.4 from room 3 or room 4? Thank you, Kay. Who was in room 3 or 4 and looked at 7.4?
I was in room 4, or Kara and I were in room 4. She's back there.
I see.
We kind of wondered if whether having a new CEO gives you a pass on this, or if it's still the standard and it wasn't met. So we kind of came up with 3 different thoughts around it. One was submitting the documentation of the hiring of the new CEO. Another was, did the board do a 90-day review that maybe didn't get submitted for the purposes of this report, because they're thinking annual review, whoever's doing the report is thinking annual review. And the last one that we thought of was like submitting the technical plan that talks about how this is going to be met next year.
Okay, so yeah, I think you guys hit right on some good points. Anybody else who looked at 7.4 want to add anything before Tim? I see you're on camera and on off mute, so I'm going to pick on you for sure this time.
Oh, yeah, no, that's okay. That's why I unmuted. So yeah, no, we talked about the same thing because, the other thing is giving some direction to that agency that they should have in the board manual, or their expectations is that they're doing
Got that lady.
especially if you got a new CEO, doing evaluation at 90 days, documenting it and all that, and setting up the closed door session, and just making sure that's scheduled out.
I never even heard that they needed that.
Oh, we talked about that too, because that's the challenge if you're going from a old, and then did the other executive director also have some kind of evaluation at that point that you could submit?
Exactly. Good. You guys really, Colleen and Tim, you guys really pulled it all together, right? So was the previous CEO, was their evaluation, did it occur during that time? And that can be provided as documentation of at that time, right? But also the fact that there's probably a 90-day evaluation that could be submitted and say, the process is in place. Here's our SOP, right? But in terms of timing, yes, they're not due for that annual appraisal. Here's our 90-day. We are being, or not 90 days. Here's a key. We don't turn in the actual appraisal, of course. We turn in documentation that the appraisal occurred. So we would say, here is, board minutes where they went into executive session or whatever they did to document that we are being attentive to this requirement. And it was really about the timing. So yes, great job, you guys. Great job. Thank you for that. Any last thoughts before we move on? All right, we're going to talk about one of my favorites now. Let's talk about data. Let's talk about numbers, right? And the key here is data, and the analysis and use of that data is often thought of as difficult in our organizations. And a lot of that has to do with the way we are structured in terms of silos and different program years, different program focuses. It gets difficult. Not to mention the fact we probably have 4, 5, 6, 10 different data systems that we're trying to use. So it's very challenging, but it can be done. So when we think about these standards, it's really about systems. Are the systems in place? And are we thinking in terms of family, agency, and community services and outcomes? Are we making sure that the board is receiving the analysis of the data? We need to do the analysis and share that with the board so that they can be informed, and so that then they can take actions and make adjustments in our strategies and the way that we deploy those strategies. And of course, we also need to have the data ready for our funders. Who else, though, if you guys think about your data, who else needs to understand our data and why? Anybody? I'll tell you, just again, harkening back to when I was at a local agency, other funding sources, legislators, good. Yeah, we want, and maybe sometimes the media, we need to have some data ready to share with the media if they come and ask us, what impact is this or that having on your communities? I would encourage you to think about frontline staff when you think about your data. Because one of the things back in the old days when I started working in this network that I experienced was that not everybody is really adept at utilizing our computer systems, utilizing our data collection systems, entering that data. And if it's not right at the front line, then boy, is it going to get complicated as it moves up the reporting line and up the data analysis line, right? We have to make sure that those frontline staff understand that they are core to our data being useful to make sure that our agency is having the impact that we plan. So always think about those frontline folks when we think about our data processes and our data culture, I would encourage. For community action, we want to make sure that we're collecting data for more than just reporting purposes, okay? I mean, seriously, we have to collect the numbers, but if that's all we're doing, then we are not getting any use out of our data. The way we use our data to answer questions is important. The way that we use our data to inform our actions and support our decisions to make those actions, we need to use our data to really give us that in-depth understanding of the conditions in our communities, the people in our communities, just really what's going on. And there's some ability to use our data to forecast future events. But that's kind of when we are able to use trended data over time. So again, we have to be constantly analyzing our data so that we can move towards mission fulfillment. It's important to recognize, though, that just gathering it, compiling it, putting it in buckets, that does not equal analysis. We need to find the folks at our agencies who are kind of the number people. And I don't mean numbers like our fiscal folks, because our fiscal folks, that's a whole other mindset that I don't even pretend to be able to get into. But the analysis piece, right? You probably have some staff at your agency that just really love knowledge. Love data, love numbers, and love crunching those numbers and asking questions of that data. And that's really an area that I would encourage you to lean into. Find those people and give them opportunities to, maybe serve on a committee that analyzes data, or work on your continuous quality improvement processes and analyzing those. Find those people and give them opportunities to use their talents. Not only will they enjoy it, but you're going to get good results when you're finding people who have that as a innate talent or desire. So, oops, I think I skipped a slide, didn't I? Oh, okay. Yeah, we want to always make sure that we are making meaning of our data, right? Because data is just numbers. Until we actually put it together and crunch it and, again, ask questions of it, it's not really useful to us in any way other than plugging it into the report that we have to send to our funders. And that's not what we want to be doing. I wish Mary Beth was here because this is one of her favorite slides in the world, but it's okay. This basically just tells the same story that I was telling. We take our data, that's the raw numbers, and we use our processes to really crunch that data and turn it into information. We use our knowledge, our past experiences to really help to turn that data and that information into actionable knowledge. So let's say that the data is that it's 30 degrees outside, all right? And so we're processing that data that we received as information from the weather guy. And we're using our authoritative capacity and our past experience to think, okay, it's 30 degrees outside, it's drizzly outside. Okay, water freezes at 32 degrees. Now, Mary Beth always says that that means she's going to be careful when she drives to work or drives anywhere. I say that because water does freeze at 32 degrees, it's 30 outside, it's drizzly, I'm not going anywhere. But that's just me. Mary Beth is much younger and more adventurous than I. But the point is that we want to take our data, process it into information, add our knowledge, add our context, and then that is when it can be used for decision making. Now, thinking about your data, your information, and your knowledge management, we really hope that you don't wind up in the unicorn quadrant here. We want to make sure that we are utilizing our data and turning it into information so that we can create insight and wisdom. Maybe not the conspiracy theory part, though. It depends on how you connect your dots. All right, so let's talk about standard 9.3. So here, this is where we are talking about making sure that our agencies actually analyze our program data and then use it to inform decision making about how we can improve our services, improve our outcomes. So it's also related to the Roma evaluation phase, right? So part of the standards, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, is that we utilize the Roma cycle as part of our management, performance management system, as the foundation of our performance management system. And so here, this also links to that, to the Roma cycle implementation standards as well. So the interpretation here is that we want to make sure that we can be confident, right? That we can be confident in our data and that we are using our data for improvement. It's not enough to just say, here, we've turned in our report, right? We need to take a look at actual outcomes versus planned outcomes. We need to take a look at, are we serving the number of people that we anticipated? We need to really compare our plans with our actual outcomes, our actual results, and our actual data, and make sure that we can then use that data to improve our processes and improve our outcomes. We also are making sure that we have the ability to analyze our data and then to present that data to the board in a way that the board can use it to make decisions. So we want to make sure that we, have the capacity to analyze our data, and then again that we have a way to provide that analysis to the board so that they can use it to make a decision. And we don't want to provide them with the entire report, because that's not going to be useful. They need to be able to receive it in like a synopsis, or maybe even some graphs and charts, some way that can show that we have analyzed that data and it's in a small enough, compartmentalized enough way that they can then utilize it for action. So really what we're talking about are some very basic analysis techniques. You don't have to have taken statistics, even though I think we probably all took statistics. It was one of my 2 Bs, so I don't really want to talk about my statistic class. But what we're talking about here is really just asking some questions of our data. We can count, just literally use counts, and then compare our counts, again, planned versus actual, for instance. And as we track data over time, that allows us to really examine any trends that we may be able to identify. So again, it's about how you pull this data together and really collate it and analyze it. That is going to give you the ability to create some insight and some knowledge. So literally some very basic data analysis processes will serve you well. And the visualization of that data is also going to serve you well. If you can put that in graphs and charts and those types of things, you're really going to serve yourselves and your boards well. So again, like I say, analysis is really about asking questions of our data. So let's just talk together about what else we might need to know here for some of these questions. So let's say that we have a piece of data, and it's that 30% of the families served by our agency are headed by single females. What else might we need to know to better understand the meaning of this data? Anybody? Pop it in the chat. You don't have to come off mute. So if 30% of the families served by the agency are headed by single females, what else might we want to know about them? Income level, okay, right? What else? Thank you, Pamela. Breaking the ice, that tends to get folks posting. Employment status, right? What else? Thanks, Michelle. Children, right? Do they have children? If so, age. Other services, what services they've used, other basics, other needs that they may have, right? So we need to really start to develop that portrait, right, of the families that are served. How about the agency achieved 20% of its target in its employment program last year? What might we need to know to provide some context to that data? Staffing levels. Okay, do we have enough staff to actually operate the program? Who participated? What went wrong, right? What went wrong with the other 80%? All right, how about this one? Men were twice as likely to complete the employment training program as women. What else do we need to know here? Is childcare needed, right? Was that a barrier? Right, what were the barriers, right? What types of jobs were available? What obstacles did the women face? How about how many men enrolled versus women, right? So if, 2 women and 500 men, then I hope men are going to be at least twice as likely, right? And then last, how about this one? 70% of those who completed the training program obtained employment. What do we want to know here? What kind of employment? Livable wage, right? Okay. Did they maintain employment, right? All right, so see, those are the types of things, that's where we can start, right? We can take a single data point and we can start to ask it questions. We can start to probe. We can start to think, what do we actually need to know here to figure out if this is a good result or not? Anybody, if y'all could just raise your hands or thumbs up me. Anybody here a Roma trainer, Roma implementer besides me? No? Oh, yes. Okay, good. I do see some. All right, awesome. So I am one of the OG Roma people. I actually decided what flavor our Kool-Aid was going to be and then, mixed it up for us all. But really, this is core to Roma, right? This is what we're talking about when we do all of those exercises between planned versus actual. It's giving us the mindset to ask questions of our data so that we can then use that data to tell stories about ideally our success, and also for internal examinations to really think about how do we improve? How do we continuously improve our performance rates? So we also want to, like I've said, we don't want to hand our boards packets like this if we can avoid it. Think about what do they need to make a decision, the decision makers, whether it's our board or management. How do they want to make this decision? Is it going to be that, there's debate? Do we need to provide proposals? What format is going to work best for them to make decisions? So again, just think about how can we bring our decision makers together and provide them with clear, concise data and information that will enable them to make decisions that are best for our organizations. So what might this look like? So let's say that we've crunched some data and our finding is that the agency received 20% of its target in the employment program last year. And so we might make a recommendation after analyzing that data that we need to create more partnerships in the following year. Or when we looked at the data about women were less likely to complete job training offered by our community action agency, we might, as you guys mentioned, expand our child care supports to remove some of those barriers. And again, this is a recommendation or an improvement that we can make, and we're going to want to circle back, right, and measure again to see whether that change that we made actually had the desired effect. Finally, agency employment programs are increasingly serving aging populations, so we may want to expand partnerships with aging organizations. Can you guys think of an example where you have had a piece of data and you've thought about it, you've analyzed it, and you came up with a recommendation for an improvement that could improve your data? Can anybody think of an example? I see your comment, Mari. Large percentage of adults in HH. Help me. What's HH? Michelle. What's HH?
Household.
Household. Thank you.
Yes. And so we built partnerships with some agencies that could help be a referral partner for services for the families.
Great. And so that is a piece of data that came about as a result of assessments and conversations with your families, correct?
Yes.
And so like, hey, what do we do here? Have you had the opportunity to have any follow-up data that shows the impact of those partnerships yet?
Not yet.
That will be interesting to know, right? Because that's going to let you know, first of all, did our change, did that move the needle? And second, how much better are our families and our communities doing, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate you, Michelle. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the documentation, right? So this is where we are going to be looking for documentation for evidence that we have actually analyzed and drafted these suggestions and shared the report with the board. So some of the documentation we might be looking at is literally a copy of the analysis report submitted to the board or the committee. Might be included in the pre-meeting materials. There might be some emails back and forth with the board sharing some of this information. And so then as they actually consider the data and take actions, then of course we would want to include a synopsis of that review and suggestions for action and that were discussed and approved. So looking at 9.4, boy, this just goes to show when the standards were created. The organization submits its annual CSBG information survey, right? So that is what we now call the CSBG annual report, about to be CSBG annual report 3.0, much less IS survey. Data report and reflects client demographics and organization-wide outcomes. So the intent here, make sure that we are submitting the correct, accurate data for our annual report. And So basically, there's a standardized, this creates a standardized format for reporting on our activities and outcomes, right, from across the country. And it really makes sure that local agencies have some basic systems to produce accurate data that's required to be submitted to the state office. I remember when literally it was the IS survey, and we were using spreadsheets, and we've come a long way, let's just put it that way. And so just as you think about your frustration that you may face with the new 3.0, and I'm talking to our friends at the state CSBG office here, of course, as well, as we face any growing pains with implementing 3.0, important to recognize that we're not just using tally marks and Excel spreadsheets anymore. So we've come a long way. So the interpretation, agencies have to be able to collect demographics agency-wide, right? We're not just talking about CSBG, we are talking agency-wide demographics here. The CSBG annual report does not only collect data about CSBG supported efforts, it collects data about everything that happens in your organization. And we want to, here's that ugly word, unduplicated. We are constantly striving to produce more and more unduplicated counts. And y'all know it's hard. State office knows it's hard. OCS knows it's hard. Everybody knows it's hard, but that doesn't mean that we don't continue to try to get there. Also, we want to make sure that we are able to report on our outcomes. No outcomes, no proof that our organizations are even needed, right? So we really want to make sure that we are continuously focusing on data accuracy and completeness. All right, so the CSBG annual report is required, the states are required to submit that, and it's really to understand the impact of CSBG funds, how they enable our organizations to create results, help to support the creation of results. But again, it is about the entire agency. Unless you're a public community action agency, then there's going to be certain programs that are perhaps under your CSBG umbrella, and that's what you would be talking about, whatever is administered by your tripartite board. For documentation, we are looking for evidence that we submitted the annual report in a timely way. So that could be a copy of the report itself, or a receipt from your organization, from your state CSBG office, or email exchanges. But you do want to keep documentation of when that was actually submitted to your state. Okay, let's see. Where are we now? All right, so thinking about data collection, data analysis, data usage, any challenges that come to your minds? Any best practices that you might want to share with your colleagues, or any questions that you want to ask me? Oh, thank you, Jenny. Sorry, you have to miss the rest. All right, all right, so we're going to talk about consumer input and involvement, but I see Deb. Let's talk about you, Deb, first. Track it through the year instead of waiting. Amen. Please track it throughout the year instead of waiting till the end. I'll guarantee you, if you wait till the end, not only are you going to stress everybody out, but your data's not going to be as clean. There's no way. Data needs to be collected as we go to be able to be more accurate, more timely, more relevant, all of the good things about data. So yes, thank you, Deb, for sharing that. We definitely want to be tracking throughout the year. So next we're going to talk about consumer input and involvement, but let's take about a 5-minute break and come back, say, at 7 after the hour, and we'll dive into that section. right, I show we are at 5 minutes. Let's come back together. And if y'all want to give me thumbs up to let me know that you are back and ready to go, we'll get started. All right, I see some. Yay. All right, I think we're at critical math. Let's go. All right, so we're going to talk about consumer input and involvement. And, you know, I've been around again many years, and we used to call the folks who come in for services at our organizations clients, and then we started talking about customers, and some people say consumers, and some people call them members, and I kind of like that one actually because they're community members and they're members of our organization. So whatever words you may use, we're going to be talking about not only the individuals and families who participate in our activities, but kind of the broader communities and how we engage and ask people to engage with our organizations as well. So thinking about what these standards look like, what we're looking to document is we want to demonstrate that that people with low incomes participate in our organizations, not just receive services, but that they are truly engaged with our organizations. We also want to make sure that, again, as part of our community assessment, we're not just relying on like national data or regional or even local data, but that we are actually asking for information from the people that we serve as part of our community assessments. And again, it's about that systematic approach to collecting and analyzing and reporting customer satisfaction data to our governing board. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like as well. So when we talk about customer voice, right, where do we need customer voice? Anywhere that people, families, communities that we serve are impacted. We want to make sure that customer voice is included. So we always like to say nothing about people without people. So what are some of the mechanisms that we can use, especially in community action, to make sure that we are hearing that customer voice and heeding that customer voice? Our tripartite board is core to making sure that we are engaging with people with low incomes, that we are heeding their voice, that we are not just listening, but that we are empowering our board members to be the ones who make the strategic decisions about our organization and decide the direction that we're going. We also may have advisory councils or advisory boards that don't act in that same governing way that our board of directors does, but that they inform our processes and they bring their experiences and their ideas and their concerns to bear as well. Our community assessment, of course, is where we have that combined qualitative and quantitative opportunity to really create an in-depth, comprehensive profile of the communities that we serve. We may have things like focus groups or community forums, public meetings, where we also provide the opportunity for people to share with us. And we want to make sure that we are capturing their feedback, their information when we have those opportunities. And then we also have our customer satisfaction surveys. How each organization deploys their customer satisfaction surveys differs. The key, though, is that we want to make sure that that information, that data is included in our community assessments and in our strategic plan, and that not only is the data included there, but that information helps us to improve our processes, improve our service delivery mechanisms, and improve our relationships with the community. So we want it to be systematic. We want it to be repeated. We want it to be a part of how we do business. And we also want to make sure that people know they're not just screaming into the void, so to speak, but that we are listening to their feedback and using their feedback to improve our interactions with them. And then we also may have program committees that have the opportunity to include the voice of our customers in terms of how we make improvements in our program delivery mechanisms. So, it's not just within the agency, though. We also want to make sure that we are including the voice from the broader community as well. And so why? Because, we're not supposed to just be these service delivery mechanisms, right? Anybody can deliver a service, but what makes community action agencies different is that we are intended to really share that power with our customers, that we are supposed to engage with our customers in a way that our systems become more responsive to the needs of low-income people and become more responsive to the needs of communities so that we can create those community level changes as well that then support healthier families. And also having the people who are the recipients of the services, the people who are going to directly benefit from any changes that we create, having them engaged in the building of those solutions, it can become a very transformational experience. So we really want to have these systems that are driven by the needs, the desires, the dreams, the goals of our customers. Then we want to make sure that we couple that with engaging with our agencies, with our staff at our agencies in a positive way, in a way that they feel supported and valued. And then all of that is what's going to be able to add up to that higher impact, those bigger outcomes, those greater changes that really are the reason that most of us show up every day for work. I don't think it's because we're becoming rich, but again, as Mary Beth said yesterday, if that's true at your agency, that you're all becoming rich, please let us know. We have our resumes ready to go. No, not really. I'm done. This is my last place. I'm retiring from here. All right, so let's talk about what does it mean if we're talking about creating that customer-centered culture? We need to have a shared vision, right? We need to have within our organization an idea, a shared ideal of why customer service, why having a good customer service experience is essential to actually us being able to achieve our mission, and how our customers having a positive experience when they come to our organizations, it really can reflect that greater commitment to our communities, right? And we want to think about our values and our culture within our organization and how that influences the customer vision that we develop, right? Because we want to develop this vision of what a customer experience would be like. So our values would be, what do we want people to feel or experience or see when they come through our doors? We want to make sure that we make our values real, that we bring them into reality, and that they reflect the way that they are reflected in the way that we act. So what ideally we'd like to see agencies do is really build that customer commitment statement collaboratively with your team, and just kind of say, what would we ideally like to see the experience be that our customers have when they interact with us. So for, let's see, 1.3, this is the systematic approach, right? For collecting, analyzing, and reporting that customer satisfaction data to the board. I don't think we have any public folks on the agency, but on the call today. If so, they might be part of a bigger process for you guys. But the intent of 1.3 is to make sure that we're not just collecting this data, but that we are actually considering the customer feedback, and that the feedback is provided to the board so that they can be aware of what we're hearing from our customers, and then they can measure or assess our attempts to improve those relationships as well. So again, org standards, right? This is a baseline. So it doesn't say what level of satisfaction your customers have to have. It doesn't say, you need to have 75% or higher satisfaction level, because that's just arbitrary, and that's not going to be meaningful in terms of meeting a baseline, right? So what the standard says is you must have this approach, and that you must do the collecting, the analyzing, and the reporting to the board. So it's really incumbent upon our organizations to take it that next step, right? To really think about how do we use the feedback that we're getting from our customers to make improvements in our service delivery processes and in the way that we interact. But in terms of documentation for this standard, for this organizational standard, we want to make sure that we're demonstrating that we're meeting all three components of the standard, right? That we're collecting, that we're analyzing, and that we're reporting the data. So systematic approach that means that, it's not one and done. It's not, oh yeah, is it time to do that again, right? That we have dates, we have processes, we know what data we're going to be collecting, we know when we're going to collect it, we know how we're going to collect it, we know how and who is going to be responsible for analyzing that data. And ideally, we have some templates or dashboards or processes where we can plug that analyzed data in, and it will have consistency over time so that we can compare how did we do in 2024 overall in customer satisfaction versus 2025 or 2026, or maybe quarterly, or at whatever time interval it makes sense for your organization. We need to have consistency in the way that we collate that data and that we present that data, so that we're comparing apples to apples in the end. And then what are our timelines, right? How often are we going to do it? When's it going to be repeated? And when are we going to do the reporting? So for documentation, you're going to want to have, to document that you have a systematic approach. So you're going to want to have a procedure or a policy that describes the operations of that customer satisfaction process. My recommendation would be that you also make sure that training on this customer satisfaction process is built into all of your training for frontline staff and for program managers as well. Regarding collection, make sure that you have copies of your data collection instruments. That might be surveys, it might be the questions that you ask of a focus group, it might be, something on social media where you launched a survey there. But then summarize that data, have your reports and data collection schedules. And then for analysis, again, you want that policy and procedure document to describe how you're going to approach data analysis, your reports, your scorecards, your dashboards, and then any written reports and recommendations that are put together for the board. And then the reporting to the board, of course. What are those reporting processes going to look like? Put that in your policies and procedures as well. What are those written reports or scorecards that are going to be submitted to the board? What are those samples? And then, of course, we want to include a note in the minutes that we actually did provide that report to the board. Whew. All right. I'm looking, I don't see any comments or questions. Okay. So for this, what could this look like at our organizations? So we might administer a survey every time we interact with a customer, right? So then the CSBG director may pull that customer satisfaction data twice a year. The data may be analyzed by program, county, disaggregated where possible to find any disparities, collated where necessary to focus on specific types of data that we want to analyze, and then, of course, the summary of that data aggregation and analysis is what we want to be providing to the board, say, biannually for this organization. All right, so let's talk a little bit. Let's look at an example. Standard 1.3. The organization has a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, and reporting customer satisfaction to the governing board, which for public agencies, yada, yada. All right, so that's the standard, right? Here's the scenario. ZYX CAA administers a client satisfaction survey every 3 years via email. The survey does not ask for personal details, including services received, to protect confidentiality. The data are aggregated into a report which is presented to the board. So are they meeting the requirements of this standard? What do we think? All right, let's try this. Thumbs up if you think that they have a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, and reporting. Thumbs, is there a thumbs down emoji? I don't know. All right, I'm not seeing anything. How about put it in the chat? Yes, no, leave me alone. Stop it, Terry. Thanks, Tom. No. All right, so I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm going to make you go any further than that. How about this? Anybody want to suggest how they might strengthen this? Let's just say that they're being. Oh wait, I see some chats. Hold on. I'm not gonna continue until I see what you guys are putting in the chat. Hold on. Think the survey meets the standards. Okay, Colleen, thank you. But I'm not sure about every 3 years. Rose says no, Deb says no, Tim says no, Michelle says no. All right, say more. So I think the survey meets the standards, right? So it is systematic. Every 3 years is systematic, right? Via email. So they have a process. They say that they aggregate it into a report. So aggregating implies at least some analysis, and they say they present it to the board. So I agree. Without the services, Deb says they are unable to tie the results to programs. Right. So there are definite ways that this could be improved, right? First of all, 3 years, I don't think that's a very useful data point. I agree with you on that. But this is connected to strategic planning. So is this being used in its best intent? Exactly. Is this useful every 3 years? Is it useful without the information about which services were satisfactory, which were not? Which services did the customers perhaps talk about barriers to either receiving the service or attaining the outcome? So yeah, I think that there are a lot of opportunities here, and you guys are bringing up some like timing, the actual design of the survey itself. I mean, we do want to protect confidentiality, but is that the right approach to protect confidentiality, right? So yeah, I think that you guys are right, and I appreciate you engaging with that finally, because I was going to sit here until Mary Beth shows up. No, I wasn't. All right, so we do, of course, here at NCAP have a handy-dandy customer-focused approach to establishing a customer-focused approach to community action agencies. Some great ideas in here. I really do hope that these resources that we're providing to you are useful, and that you come back and take a look at them. I didn't copy this one over into the chat. I apologize. I missed this one, but it will be in the slide deck when we share that with you guys. All right, so category 1, any questions, best practices you want to share? Any challenges that you guys are having in terms of this particular concept? Okay. All right. Organizational leadership. Let's go straight into there. Think this is always challenging. I think so, Michelle. I think that the more structure you can provide, the more repetition and the more broadly across your organization you can deploy your customer satisfaction surveys, the better the outcomes you're going to have, the better the data, and the more meaning you're going to be able to make of that data. So it just takes some intentionality, but it can be done. More ways we can offer opportunities for people to engage, the better. That's right. And especially, these days, because we don't have to just hold a public meeting and hope somebody comes because we have cookies, right? There are lots of opportunities to engage. We just have to be deliberate about it and actually do it. So, all right, let's move into, people are tired, Lord, aren't we, though? Let's move into organizational leadership. All right, so here, this is really about mission, vision, values, about the core of community action, that we are outcome-based, that we are the anti-poverty organizations in our communities, and that we can link all of these things, our mission and our approaches, to our community assessment, so that we are demonstrating that we are being responsive to the needs of our communities. We also here start linking our plans, right? Our community action plan, which talks about what are we going to do with our CSBG funding, and our strategic plan, but that all of those things are really put together and operationalized using our Roma cycle, right? For assessment, planning, implementation, achievement of results, and evaluation. And we'll talk about what 4.3 means in terms of what does that mean to use a certified Roma trainer or equivalent, blah, blah. And also that we provide our boards with updates on the success of our specific strategies within the community action plan. Another thing we're talking about here is a succession plan for CEOs. We'll do a little bit of talking about that. And we will also, we're not going to do a deep dive into 4.6 for the risk assessment because we covered that yesterday. All right, so for 4.1, what's the requirement here? It's really to make sure that the board reviews our mission statement, at least in the past 5 years, make sure that our mission addresses poverty, and that we then deliver services and programs, operate programs and deliver services that are in alignment with that mission, that we're not suffering from mission drift, that we are not just chasing dollars, but that we make sure that the resources that we bring to bear in our communities are in alignment with our mission. And so again, we want to make sure that the board is engaged in its duty to really provide that strategic direction to the board and that strategic oversight of our efforts to meet our mission. No real guidelines. Again, these are baseline org standards. So there's no specific requirement about what that means if your board reviews the mission statement. Those of you who are Roma professionals, you know what your board needs to talk about. Those of you who are not Roma professionals and don't have one at your agency, talk to a Roma professional. They'll tell you what they need to know. Also, there's no specific requirements about what the mission statement needs to say or how we need to determine whether our programs and services are in alignment with our mission. So the basics are there, but again, org standards are that baseline. So we'll do a little talking about moving that needle towards excellence. Again, we want to make sure that our boards are actively engaged in setting the strategic direction of our organizations, right? They need to be focused on our why. And we will be the ones who are, boots on the ground and doing the thing. But we want to make sure that our boards understand our purpose, that they know where we're going. They're steering the ship, and that they make sure that our values and our philosophies and our cultures are supportive of us being able to do the work that actually moves us towards fulfillment of our mission. But, people say, well, we're a nonprofit. Well, that's a tax status. It's not a business model. And so sometimes what we want to make sure we're providing our boards with is information to make these mission impact decisions, right? So sometimes performance management becomes very difficult because we have to make sure that we're making strategic decisions that really balance the achievement of our mission, but still allow our organizations to be sustainable, right? So ideally, we're going to be able to really promote these high mission impact programs. Sometimes there's not going to be any profitability in those high mission impact programs. That's fine because it's high mission impact, right? But that mission impact, low profitability, if a program or an initiative is actually taking a lot of our resources and we're not seeing any progress, it's not impacting our mission, then we really have to consider and make the tough decisions that that's not a direction we need to continue going. So again, having that information available for our board members can allow them to do this analysis and think, well, is this something that we still need to do if it's not helping us to move towards our mission? So for documentation, you're going to want to, note when the board reviews your mission, right? It could be that there's perhaps a committee that takes a look at it. The whole board may look at your mission statement, but in the end, that the full board should participate in saying, yes, this is what we want our mission to say, or these are the revisions to the mission that we want to see done. And then in terms of alignment and programs, I would recommend, of course, you need to document it in the minutes, but I would recommend some kind of a metric, some kind of a tool where you can kind of track this program, this service is aligned with strategic goals such and such, right? So when you can draw those linkages, then that is going to help you to document that the board is making sure that programs and services are in alignment with the strategic plan. All right, 4.2, our community action plan has to be outcome focused, needs to address the causes and conditions of poverty, and needs to tie directly to our community assessment, right? This is really core to a requirement of the CSBG Act. That community action plan is required by the CSBG Act. And so we want to make sure that we have specific measurable outcomes included in our community action plan, that it is clear that the services and programs that we are operating are intended to address poverty. And then in terms of our community assessment, we want to, again, make sure that we can justify our community action plan based upon the results of our community assessment. So we want to be able to link it to those findings, those key findings in our community assessment of the highest identified needs, most prevalent needs, emergent needs, those types of things. So it's really, what we're really talking about here is integration. Peter Drucker said that, most difficult thing really about having organizations like ours is making sure that all of the pieces connect So, it's how we connect that community assessment to the strategic plan, how we make sure that the community action plan, which really just speaks to the use of our CSBG funds, how that is also linked to the strategic plan, and that all of those reflect the information that we receive from our communities as part of our community assessment, as well as that kind of more standardized data that we may pull from the U.S. Census or other resources for data that we use. All right, so let's talk just a tiny bit. I think I've probably already covered this in context anyway. So when we talk about an agency strategic plan, this is where we are actually making sure that the board is the one that is identifying our direction that we're going to be moving in and our major goals, right? So it would include outcomes and actions and how we're going to measure the achievement or progress towards those goals. Again, the community action plan, that's the details about how we're going to use CSBG funds to really support or leverage our other funding. And then program plans basically are the individual grant proposals or funding proposals that we have for our many, many programs. All right, so why? Why do we have the community action plan? Part of CSBG Act. So the state offices are actually required to collect a community action plan from each of the grantees. The community action plans, again, talk about the strategies we're going to deploy to address the local needs that were identified in our community needs assessment, and then how we're going to tie all of those services and strategies together to really talk about how we're addressing the causes and conditions of poverty. And so CAP plans often include like maybe a summary of our needs assessment, a narrative talking about what we're going to be doing, targets and projections for outcomes and services. That's that planned and eventually actual, a budget, along with a budget narrative, and then some of the information that's required in terms of board composition and the sector representation as required for the tripartite board. All right, 4.2, documentation. Outcome based. So you're going to have a copy of your community action plans that show your outcomes. You want to have annotations that really describe what the anti-poverty objectives of your programs and strategies are. Again, really making that very clear connection. And then your community action plan ideally will reference the associated community assessment report that you will have, so that you can show why that's a strategy that you are including in your community action plan by linking it directly to your community assessment outcomes or needs. All right, I need to quit talking for a second. So think about this, and somebody put it in the chat or come off mute and talk about, is there ever a time that we would not address a top identified need in our community action plan, or that we would not dedicate CSBG funding to a top identified need in our community? Why would we not do that? Aha, Michelle, if someone else is doing it well, right? What else? That's perfect, Michelle, by the way. Have you been to this training before? What else? No, okay. Anybody have any other ideas? So let's say there's this big, huge top identified need. What else? What might keep us from addressing it? Doesn't fit our mission. Right, exactly. That's right. There are lots of needs in our community. We cannot be all things to all people. There are other organizations that may be doing a good job. There are other organizations that may have that as a mission. And of course, Michelle, yeah, the bottom line, right? Funding. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the funding, we don't have the access to the funding to be able to do all things. But we want to have that conversation, right? If something is identified as a top need, we want to consider it and think about, is this something that fits our mission, we have the capacity to do, and that is, we would not be replicating efforts that are already working well in our community. So perfect. Thank you, guys. All right, let's talk about 4.3. So this is the Roma cycle standard. And basically what it says is that we will demonstrate continuous use of the full Roma cycle or comparable system, and also that we document having used the services of a Roma certified trainer or equivalent. All right, so we all know what the Roma cycle is, right? Assessment, planning, Roma cycle, right? The reason that it is still important that we demonstrate that we are fully implementing Roma is because our organizations change, right? We don't have the same staff. Folks may not even know what that means. So we need to have a standard to make sure that we are fully deploying what we've agreed as a network are the basics of our performance management systems, right? The reason that we say that you need to use the services of a Roma certified trainer is to just take a look at your plans, take a look at your documentation, and make sure that you are able to demonstrate the use of the Roma cycle. So it does not require that you have a Roma certified professional on staff. Sometimes state associations may be able to connect you with Roma folks in your state that you can have a conversation with. Barbara Mooney and Carrie Gibson at the Association of Nationally Certified Roma Trainers are certainly wonderful resources that you can reach out to if you need connecting with a Roma professional for them to take a look at your documentation, how you're using the Roma cycle. Here is that handy dandy Roma cycle. I thought I had that slide in here, but I couldn't quite remember. So, excuse me. Again, we want to make sure that we recognize that this is not the kind of cycle that's like you move from assessment to planning to implementation to achievement of results to evaluation. There are activities going on in every segment of the Roma cycle at your organization at any given time. So we need to make sure that we are aware of that and that we're not waiting for the achievement of results part to start, right? But we don't want to lose sight of each of these segments. We want to make sure that they are getting fully documented. So how do we do that? Oh, where'd it go? I'm sorry, I think I just skipped a slide. Nope, there it is. Okay, sorry. So we want to identify the elements of each, right? Where do we document assessment? Where do we document planning? And call those out within the community action plan and within the strategic plan. You can, as far as documenting the use of a Roma professional, we want to make sure that we have an agreement with a Roma professional and that there's just evidence that that Roma professional has reviewed or otherwise provided some input in your planning or your implementation. But they do not have to develop your plan or approve your plan or be involved in every stage of their development. You just need to demonstrate that you have utilized the services of a Roma professional to review your implementation of the Roma cycle. We do have a handy dandy resource. It's about 2 or 3 pages as far as how you might go about documenting standard 4.3. New for requirement to use Aroma Pro. Yeah, that is for part of 4.3. Yes. All right, 4.5 is succession plan. We are required to have a succession plan in place for the CEO or ED. Oh, hey, there's Mary Beth. So we want to make sure that that succession plan has been approved by the governing board, and that it contains procedures for covering either an emergency, unplanned short-term absence of 3 months or less, as well as what is the process going to look like when we are filling that permanent vacancy. And so the intent here really is just to make sure that we have a plan in place should there be a vacancy for any reason in the CEO or ED role, whether short-term or long-term. Hi, Mary Beth. Did you want to say hi?
Hi.
She survived. She survived her other webinar, so yay. All right, so let's talk about interpretation of 4.5. Excuse me. Really, there are 3 components here that we're looking at. We want to make sure that we have a written succession plan for our CEO or ED, that succession plan has been approved by the board, and that those procedures are included, right? Emergency, unplanned, or short-term absence, or 3 months or less, and that process for filling the permanent vacancy. And succession plans typically also name interim leaders, identify, where critical organizational documents like our contracts or communication plans, emergency plans, where all of those things are located, just in case. All right, so here's a process for implementing succession essentials. Preparing your community action agency's future. We have worked to create a guide. I forget the organization that we worked with, and I'm going to put that in the chat here in just a second. Hold on.
I've got you, Terry. Go ahead.
Got it? Okay, thanks. So again, we want to take that systematic approach, right? We want to make sure that we have all of our folks in place that are going to conduct create this plan. We want to make sure that we get our project ducks in a row, gather our documentation, make sure that we have updated job descriptions, talk about that emergency backup plan, and then really develop the succession policy, have the task force review and reflect upon those plans, present it to the board, have them review and reflect, and then finalize and implement the plan. And of course, because we love you all greatly, we have a template that you can utilize to actually develop this succession policy. And all right, so in terms of documentation, we're going to be looking for a copy of that succession plan, making sure that, it includes short-term and permanent vacancies. We want to note in the board minutes when that succession plan was approved. And then for public agencies, again, you would be governed by your local government policies. And I, again, don't think we have any public agencies on the call today. All right, so one of the things that we want to really recommend in terms of a key skill, thinking about succession, is to really build your leadership bench. And there are opportunities that we provide here at NCAP to really help to build that leadership opportunities, those leadership opportunities within your organization. Of course, Certified Community Action Professional, or CCAP. We have the Pathways to Excellence that we'll talk a little bit about later. We have new and emerging leader training and opportunities, and we typically have new executive director, CEO training and meeting opportunities annually as well. But when we think about building for the future, we really want to think holistically, right? How can we make a commitment to building leadership within our organizations at all levels, right? how do we make sure that we are considering what skill sets are needed for people to be able to move up within our organization? And then how do we build some intentionality into the opportunities that we provide for people to move up within our organizations? And how do we then embed that into our organizational processes, right? So we want to really, again, think systematically, and we want to think about how we develop our team from within and make sure that we have a focus long term on building our future talent within our organizations. So when we think about how do we do that, right? How do we really develop capacity within our staff? Let me ask you, what has worked at your organizations? How do you guys promote development among your staff members? And Mary Beth is here, so you guys have to all talk now. What have you guys done? What's worked at your organization? Does anybody have like a leadership development program that you could share? Okay. All right. So here's some ideas that we have. All right. So you can really start thinking about, how can we build this capacity within our organization? So we could give people what are called stretch assignments, right? Something that kind of takes them outside of where they're normally at and gives them an opportunity to try something beyond their typical roles or their typical responsibilities, and gives them an opportunity, to really learn by trial and error, again, by kind of stretching outside of their normal role. Of course, coaching, we could think, who can coach staff from within our organizations to help build their understanding of community action, to help build their understanding of working with families over time. Lots of coaching opportunities. And we do have some coaching training modules that are available if you would like some more information on that. We might have a formal training program. You may have local leadership programs. Of course, we have leadership programs at NCAP as well. So just a lot of different ways, job shadowing or job rotation. You may have some internal education opportunities, and also that exposure within our organizations to people who do similar jobs, different jobs, to our leadership, to our board members, to our decision makers, and really giving people the opportunity to express their interests, recognizing their talents and recognizing their passions, and really giving people the opportunity to grow and lean into their strengths is going to serve your organization well.
Harry, something I like to point out here is like when you look at this list, and all of us, have been through a professional development journey, right, ourselves. And I always love to look at this list and think about like what was most impactful for me, right? And like you all could think about that yourselves and how, what was impactful for you and how could your organization ensure that others get that same opportunity, right? Like I think all the time about the stretch assignments that my boss gave me. And let me tell you, I cussed them when they first gave me those stretch assignments. And now I'm so grateful to all of my leaders who saw something in me and gave me an opportunity to do something a little bit different, right? So I think about that all of the time in my, kind of leadership as well, that like, how can I give folks stretch assignments because it was so impactful to me, right? So yeah, just something to think about internally.
Oh, stretch assignments. Oh, that's what I used to call it when I said, oh, my ED threw another hat on top of my, okay, stretch assignment. That's a good euphemism. I like that one.
Yeah, other duties as assigned, AKA stretch assignments.
Fine, exactly. Kay says, our leadership team is undergoing executive coaching. That is awesome. And that is very impactful. We see a lot of organizations who, again, kind of build their leadership bench by putting people through that type of executive coaching and really building from within. So you guys might think that we are just beautifully in sync like this, but guess what? It is time for me to do. It's time for me to turn things over to Mary Beth. It's almost as though we planned it this way. Mary Beth, I think we're actually going to take a little bit of a break, let you kind of get your footing for a few minutes. And I had a break planned. Let's take a break until 4:05. How about that? Oh, I'm sorry, 5 after the hour. I'm in Central Time. So 5 after the hour. Okay. All right. Then we'll hear from Mary Beth.
Okay, this is the 1 minute warning. We're going to get started here in just a second to land the plane with everyone's favorite topic, which is HR. Terry, yesterday I landed the plane with finance, and today I'm landing it with HR. Like,
I mean, what can I say? It's just great. It's just great kismet, man.
everyone is gonna love me. Everyone is gonna love me. And yes, very, very lucky. Michelle says my previous role for 10 years. Got to be your favorite too. Oh boy, I better be careful about what I say, HR director. So okay. Okay. Oh, it's not 4:05 yet. I'm gonna hold for 10. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Now the clock rolled over. It's 5 after the hour. We want to get you out of here a little bit before the top of the hour. But please don't let that hold you back on your participation. It actually goes faster if you all talk. It's awesome. So, okay, we're going to go into category 7, which is HR. HR is one of those spaces that you see both those standards, that there are like external rules that kind of govern, some of the standards here. Like if you don't do some of these things, you could be in trouble with other issues. And there's a lot of these in here that are truly best practice for an effective nonprofit organization. So let's just kind of scroll through these standards. You've got to have personnel policies. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. You have to make sure that everyone has those policies and actually share them with folks. Pretty important part of it. You do need to have written job descriptions for all positions, and those job descriptions have to be updated at least within the last 5 years. I honestly think 5 years can even be a little long, but alas, that is the minimum requirement to meet the standard. The board has to conduct a performance appraisal of the CEO. I am going to talk about that. And then also along with that, the board has to approve the CEO's compensation within every calendar year as well. You have to have a policy in place for regular written evaluation of employees by supervisors. I will point out that that standard says regular written evaluation. It does not say annual evaluation. So just going to point that out. That might be one of those places where the best practice is to do an annual evaluation, or maybe even more frequently, depending on your org. But yep, you have to have a whistleblower policy in place. There has to be new staff orientation to make sure folks know what they're doing when they get there, right? This is also a funny standard in that it says all staff participate in a new employee orientation. So that does actually mean staff have to go to the new employee orientation within 60 days of hire. And then you do have to make sure that you're making staff development and training available on an ongoing basis, which is kind of what we just talked about a few minutes ago, right? About, making sure that folks have good training and support to grow their capacity within the organization. So, okay, let's dive into standard 7.1. The organization has to have written personnel policies. And by the way, those personnel policies have to be reviewed by an attorney and approved by the governing board within the past 5 years. So this is another one of those standards that there are multiple requirements. Could you have written personnel policies that aren't board approved? You sure could, but you wouldn't be able to be meeting the standard then, right? You could have personnel policies that have been approved by the board, but have they been reviewed by an attorney? That might, be a hang up too. So really, truly, you got to be sure that you have a regular cadence for when you're going to review your policies. When the review happens, that it goes before an attorney. And this kind of goes without saying, friends, but that attorney should really be an HR attorney or someone with that level of expertise. There are all kinds of, different types of lawyers, and they're not all created the same. So get your personnel policies in front of an actual HR attorney, and then make sure you get those approved by the governing board on an ongoing basis. So yeah, Terry.
I would also just add that make sure that either that attorney is in your state and so therefore aware of any state personnel employment laws, or that they are, familiar with your state laws.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Just like, yeah, there's all different types of attorneys. States are all a little bit different, so make sure you've got that good relevant guidance. Thank you for that. On the next slide, too, if you're wondering, like, what should it be in my HR handbook? I'm not quite sure. You could take a look at this recommendation from SHRM. SHRM is the Society of Human Resource Managers. I hope I said that right. Someone will correct me if I didn't. But they're a great resource for all things HR, not just for this kind of stuff, but do check that out. And then on the next slide, we grabbed a screenshot of some of the things that they think should be in your policy. I don't think that this is everything that's supposed to be there, but oh, it might be. This might be the whole table of contents that they kind of recommend that you have within your policies. It's not, these aren't the only things, right? You might have other stuff that is really important to your organization. You can add those as well. So for meeting 7.1, you have to have, your physical uh, policy manual, right? That's, something you would show to your state office. It does not say, by the way, the standard doesn't say your policies have to include these specific things. So, whatever your policies are for meeting 7.1, you send those on and that should work for this standard unless your state has other specific requirements. Also, your state contract for your CSBG funding or maybe for other funding as well might have additional requirements of what it wants to see in your HR policies. I had that in Kentucky. We had some things that my contract said I had to put into my policies, so I did. So do be aware of that. Any kind of board minutes that show it's actually been approved, and then like show where the attorney has reviewed the policy. That might be an invoice, that might be a chain of emails. Just make sure that you've got that really clearly documented. Okay, and I see that Michelle put in the chat another great resource, MRA, the trusted resource, the trusted HR experts. Michelle, is there anything you would want to add about MRA, who they are and what they do?
They are a human resources provider, and they have just a ton of really great resources on policies, templates, toolkits. They do trainings, and they serve Wisconsin, I think it's Michigan, Minnesota, Iowa, somewhere, but pretty localized. And so they're very familiar with HR law, employment law in our area. So
That's great. That's great. That's a great recommendation. So friends, there you go. A peer recommendation of a great resource for you. We'd love to see that. So thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move us forward then to standard 7.4. Everyone loves to talk about this one. The governing board has to conduct a performance appraisal of the CEO or executive director within each calendar year. So the board has one employee, and that one employee is the CEO. And so the board has to evidence that they are providing the proper oversight and support of that CEO so that they can be successful. Now, there's a few kind of nuances of this standard. Notice that there's a timeline actually dictated in this one, right? It says you have to have this done each calendar year. So that might mean that one year it happened in May, and then the next year you're not going to do it until October, and that might be fine so long as that's allowed within your policies. There's nothing in here about what the content of that appraisal is. Content or appraisals tend to be pretty specific to the organization and to the role. The other thing is that the appraisal can be conducted either by the committee or by the full board, but either way, the full board should vote and accept that appraisal and make sure that it is documented within the board minutes. It's not unusual to see the executive committee or a personnel committee actually conduct the lead the appraisal, maybe have the one-on-one meeting with the ED, but that it includes the input of the entire board. So just wanted to flag that for you. In terms of what you might need for documentation of this one, you need board minutes that show that that approval happened. This standard does not require that that performance appraisal go to the state office. A performance appraisal of an employee is is personal, right? I don't want my performance appraisal to go anywhere other than to me and my boss. So the state really does not need to see the completed appraisal. Now, you might send the tool to show, what the content of it was if really needed, but really what should be sufficient here are the board minutes that show that the appraisal happened, and that it was approved by the full board. Okay. I also just want to flag too that sometimes and commonly that review would be done in an executive session. Again, it is not that the executive session notes would go to the state, but more so that when you come back into full session, that there's an acknowledgement that the appraisal was conducted and that the full board has approved that appraisal that happened in executive session. Okay, that way you can keep things private. So, few other points on this. I think I kind of already talked to these. Make sure you have that written evaluation. Make sure that you have the board minutes that reflect that. And by the way, it's not required that you do the portion on compensation at the same time, but like, come on, it's kind of the best time to do it. And so not required, but this is kind of a natural time to do that. So for a lot of our board members, they may not have ever supervised someone. Maybe they haven't done performance appraisals, and maybe they've never supervised an executive, which is a little bit different. And an executive evaluation is different. I love this resource from BoardSource that gives boards some guidance on how to conduct an executive evaluation. So you can check that out there. And I think we already talked about the documentation that's required. I think we repeated this one, so we can just move on ahead unless folks have any questions or thoughts. I'm going to start to talk about 7.5, which, as I said, is very closely related to 7.4. This is about reviewing and approving the compensation of your CEO or executive director, again, within every calendar year. The board has to exercise its oversight of the CEO. They have to approve that compensation on an ongoing basis. There are some federal policies that limit executive compensation for entities who receive federal funds. And by the way, that compensation does refer to total compensation, which would include fringe and benefits and not just salary. So that kind of takes us to our next slide. Another point we want to make, I just said it, it's more than salary. Compensation is not just salary. There is a requirement as a nonprofit organization that your compensation be reasonable and not excessive. And whenever you fill out your 990 every year, you have to include a description of the process that you used to approve that executive compensation that makes sure that you talk about how you know that that compensation is reasonable. One of the really common ways that organizations say that they did this is they do a salary study, or they've reviewed the compensation of other executives, and, other job postings. You can get this information by reviewing other 990s in the area, just to be sure that your compensation is not excessive. Make sure if that's your process that you have it documented for the IRS, right? Again, this is one of those things where if you run amok of this kind of requirement, you get into some bigger trouble with IRS, and no one wants to be in trouble with the IRS. So there can be some allowability things to be aware of, maybe different funding sources might want to only fund a part of the compensation of the ED, things like that. You've got to be aware of that. And then, just be aware of those conflicts of interest. Anything that looks like a conflict of interest or smells like a conflict of interest could be perceived as a conflict of interest. So you have to manage for all of those things in this process. On the next slide, too, I am not a lawyer. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm also not a CPA, but that determining reasonable and not excessive gets very technical very fast. And so here's just some advice for determining that reasonable and not excessive. Use a process, look at other nonprofit 990s, use your state association. You can purchase a salary study from lots of different places to help you ensure this. And then on the next slide is the idea of rebuttable presumption, essentially to make sure that your compensation is reasonable and not excessive. You would have to do these three things, right? The compensation must be approved in advance by the authorized body, which means you can't pay someone that higher salary until the board has actually approved that salary. And those people have to not have a conflict of interest when they do that. You used reasonable data like we just talked about, and then, you documented the basis for that determination. So you have to hit all of those three, and when you do, you have rebuttable presumption that you've used a reasonable process. So like if your blood pressure was going up, I hope I've brought it back down. There's also this really great resource from the National Council of Nonprofits on how boards can go about approving approving executive compensation. So you can check that out as well. Here's all the documentation that you will need to send to your state, just to, dot your T's and cross your I's, that you have fulfilled the requirements of this standard. I don't see any questions coming in. These are two standards that we frequently get questions about, but I'm just going to pause for 1 second. Don't see anything. Okay, let's move ahead then to 7.7. Oddly enough, 7.7 is a standard that we frequently get questions about or that is frequently missed. Maybe not in your state, but we see this commonly across the country. So you have to have a whistleblower policy that has been approved by your governing board. And what the whistleblower policy does is it, essentially gives protection and lines out the process that a person would need to take if they suspected that something was not right within the organization. There needs to be a process that staff can use to report that to the board. So the board should absolutely approve that process, and that's really critical to, the well-being of your organization. So yeah, Michelle, I see your hand is raised.
I just wanted to make a comment about this. In my experience, one of the things that I have seen happen is when I have had an employment attorney review our personnel policies, a lot of times they're, of course, unaware of the org standard requirement. And so I've had attorneys say, well, you don't really need this whistleblower policy in here. You're not required to have this in here this way. And then I've said, well, our community action org standards do require it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes that can get confusing, that guidance from employment lawyers if the HR staff or whoever's putting the personnel policies together doesn't know this requirement.
That's a really good point. And again, it goes back to making sure that you have really good legal representation to who not just understands nonprofits, but understands community action too. That really goes a long way. And yeah, don't be afraid if the lawyer is saying something to you like, oh, you don't have to do this. Like, don't be afraid to say, yeah, by the way, actually, we have this other requirement that says we do have to have this. Like, lawyers are an expert in the law and you are an expert in your context. So that means you might have to, sometimes you're educating your lawyer as you go. So thank you for that, Michelle. Okay, so the interpretation here is you got to have a policy. It's got to be board approved. If you need a sample whistleblower policy, our friends at CAP Law have one for you. So you can grab this from their website. And Terry will throw that into the chat in just a minute. And hey, guys, remember yesterday when we were looking at the Nonprofit Risk Management Center, and they have those sample policies as well. Whistleblower policy is one of the ones that they have. So if you don't like CAP laws, you can use theirs. Honestly, if you Google a nonprofit whistleblower policy, you're going to find lots of really good examples. I'm wondering at what point in my career I'm going to stop saying you can Google that and just start saying you could have ChatGPT build you one. I feel like that tipping point is coming, but maybe is not quite there yet. I wouldn't have ChatGPT generate my whistleblower policy without attorney review. Let me say it that way. So, okay. 7.7 documentation, you've got to have that actual whistleblower policy. You've got to have your board minutes where it was approved, or if you use board resolutions, you can do that too. Okay. 7.9, I feel like we've already kind of talked about 7.9. The idea here is that you make available staff development and training, including Roma, on an ongoing basis, because obviously we have to care for our staff. We have to be sure that they have the skills they need to fulfill their jobs. The standard only requires that you're providing training on an ongoing basis. It does not spell out what kinds of trainings staff have to have. A lot of times funding streams might have different requirements, right? Like if you've got Head Start, Friends, you've got lots of requirements that your staff have to fulfill. But this standard doesn't say you've got to do all of these things. It just says you've got to make training available. You've got to have a way that you think about your training to make sure it's available. And it does say, that Roma training has to be provided on an ongoing basis. It does not say that Roma training has to be provided to all staff. That's been kind of a misinterpretation we've heard of the standard before. Roma training may or may not make sense for all of your staff. So just don't read this as you must do Roma training and everyone must go, nor does it say you have to do it on an annual basis. It just has to be your process. Terry, did you have something you wanted to add? Terry feels strongly that you should provide Roma training across your organization.
Also feel strongly, as the last piece here on this slide says, it doesn't have to be that formal intro to Roma. There are lots of different Roma trainings out these days. We're not stuck to that 1 day long intro to Roma, build a logic model all day. So I do encourage folks to take a look out there, look at the Ansert website and see what else is out there, because there's a lot of stuff out there these days.
Thank you, Terry. All right, so on the next slide, here's your documentation. Show your professional development plans. If you have an agency policy that kind of dictates how professional development and ongoing training is handled within your organization, you might also show that you're actually offering the training on an ongoing basis. So that might be sign-in sheets or whatever else. This says HR or personnel files. And every time I see it, I say, gosh, we have to remember to change that slide, because you wouldn't actually, bless you, you wouldn't actually send a personnel file to the state office, but showing that the rundown of who attended training is perfectly fine. So, okay, my next slide is one of my favorite slides. I want to say to you, yeah, let's get real though, right? Like all of these standards are wonderful, but our biggest HR challenges, honestly, are not the things that we just listed here, right? It's not the policies, it's not the, doing the performance evaluations, it's the people side of things, right? That makes HR, really, really challenging. I'm looking for Michelle to affirm that this is correct as a former HR director, right? Like these things, they're really important practices. I don't mean to knock them, but just like there's a lot more to HR than just this stuff. And so one of the big things we really encourage you to think about is how to support your staff to be well in your organization. Well, staff are better able to do their jobs if that's what you're really focused on. But also, your staff are a part of your community, and as community action agencies, we care about the entire community. And when our staff are well and their community members are better able to support and engage in our broader community and fulfill our mission, truly, really. So if you want some resources to kind of help you think about employee well-being, we like this framework from Gallup. Gallup does a ton of really great research on workforce trends. They put out great reports on that on a regular basis. So they really know what's happening in the workforce. And so you can check out this guide that goes into what is well-being for staff, and how can your organization support not just like career well-being, but really holistic well-being with and for your team. And so that's actually on the next slide as well, that has some of the things that they talk about in this resource. So we have come to the end of category 7. I want to check in and kind of see, are there any particular challenges folks want to talk about? Is there a best practice that you're feeling really good about, or any questions that you have? I'll say the other day, Terry and I had a conversation with a group about best practices for employee well-being. And man, we heard some great things, right, Terry? Did I say this yesterday too? I think I did, right? No, I didn't. Oh, good. I'm not repeating myself. There was a group who talked about that they had just put in a community garden, but it was like really a staff garden. So staff could get fresh fruits and veggies, kinds of efforts like doing like a walking club to help encourage folks to get up and get moving and get outside, during the day. Because let's be real, some of us come in, we sit down at our desks and we don't leave. I actually don't know what the weather is outside, so that's a reminder to myself to get up and move, right? But there's lots of like really small ways that you can help to support well-being. So I haven't seen anything come in. I haven't seen anyone come off mute. Okay. Terry, am I still doing this? Okay, wonderful. So that's kind of the end of our section on diving into the specific standards. If you have a standard that you really wanted to talk about and Terry and I have not touched it yet, please send us a note. We're happy to dive any specific standard. We can do it on the fly. It'll be really fun. You can put us on the spot and see if you can stump us. Actually don't want you to take that challenge. Oh no, someone took the challenge. Michelle,
Not really that way, but one of the questions that I hear people talk
So I
about or
didn't.
challenges
I thought I lost my video, but I didn't.
is that how do I want to say this? Like just having a way to have an overall framework, kind of an aerial view, if you will, of the org standards, how they're organized, the timing of that, and how, especially when you have new leaders coming into the organization and you're trying to just really ramp up their knowledge to equip them with those for those responsibilities, are there some tools, tricks, tips that would be helpful? Thanks.
That's a good question. We're going to talk about tools in just a minute and highlight some of the tools that we have on the NCAP website. But I might actually put that out to colleagues on the call too, right? Is there something that you're doing with org standards that helps new leaders understand what they are, or helps your entire team to understand what they are? What are folks doing in the org standards space? Terry, one time we had a group talk about some of this, and I seem to remember one of our colleagues talking about that they had a spreadsheet where they had each standard lined out. They had the when is it due, who is responsible right beside it. And so that spreadsheet really helped to give overall visibility to all of the standards and helped them track some of their timelines and be real clear about who's doing what. And I think we might even have that template, don't we?
I'm going to go get that. They did share that with us. So I'm going to go get that. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, we can share that tool with you. It worked really well for their organization. The other thing that I say all the time too is, doing ongoing training on the org standards makes a lot of sense. Like just because you did training once 3 years ago doesn't mean that anybody remembers their responsibilities with the org standards or what the heck they are. So building it into your training calendar, I think is another great thing to do. The NCAP website has a ton of resources too that I'm going to touch before we wrap up as well. Colleagues, if you have any resources to help out your friend, please share, and Terry and I are about to share this resource that we received from another agency, right? So like if you've got a practice, you can really help others by sharing it with each other and with NCAP, because then we can share it more broadly too. Okay, so last couple points we want to make before we wrap up here. We've talked a lot about how can you meet the standards, but I want to bring you back to the standards are really an opportunity to serve as building blocks for your organization's capacity. And you could do the standards and not be an excellent organization or even be a strong organization, honestly. So, these are building blocks, but you're going to have to do some more things if you really want to ramp up and be the best organization you can be, because, your community doesn't just deserve a functioning community action agency, it deserves an excellent community action agency. And so, on the next slide, here's a from compliance to capacity view for you that, a lot of times we get stuck in like, how do we just check the box? How do we, meet the minimum requirement? How do we check the box for our state monitors? Just do that documentation that one time, right? And that is very different than a capacity view. And I encourage you where you can, where you have space, where you have energy to use the standards to take that capacity view of how do we not just meet the requirement, but how do we build a system that sustains our performance, right? How do we not just, do the training a couple of times, but make sure that we have a good policy that supports everyone getting the training they need to be successful? How do we make sure that those practices are in our agency culture, just the way that we do things when we do our community assessments, that we're, not just, checking the box, but we're doing focus groups and we're really getting the voice of the community, right? And going from, that assuring accountability today, checking the box, to making sure that we're building our capacity for future effectiveness. So how you build capacity in this way, I'll encourage you, is to do a good self-assessment. Don't stop at like, yeah, I met the standard, good, let's move on. That's on the next slide. Assess the extent to which you are meeting the intent of the standard, right? Yeah, we're doing it, but are we doing it to the best of our ability? And a really good reflection question for you is, what would it look like if we were doing this to the best of our ability? And that enables you to find some gaps and build plans for improvement. So if we want to try it out, again, this will go faster if you participate. No pressure. On the next slide, yeah, let's try it out. So look, standard 1.3. What would it look like if we did this to the best of our ability? The organization has a systematic approach for collecting, analyzing, and reporting customer satisfaction data to the board. What are some things you think it would do, or what would it look like for you to do that to the best of your ability? What are some things you think you might do? How often do you think you're collecting data? Yeah, we have a committee that shares this work, right? So maybe it's not just a one and done, right? Have a written procedure and assign the right person. Yeah. And how frequently do you think you're doing this? Build it into my everyday work. Yep. How frequently, though, do you think that you're collecting the data about customer satisfaction? At least annually. If you're doing it to the best of your ability, how often do you need feedback from your customers about how you're doing? Monthly? Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of organizations, it's not even necessarily the reporting to the governing board, but you probably need customer satisfaction data on an ongoing basis. Every interaction with a customer is an opportunity to get their feedback about how you're doing. If you wait until just once a year, we're going to send out an evaluation of how we did, you've missed an entire year of opportunity to be the best organization you can be. So maybe you have your systematic approach is we collect the data on an ongoing basis. As Pamela said, on a monthly basis, we look at it, we analyze it, and then on the maybe the biannual or the annual basis, you send it up to your governing board, right? So that everybody is aware, right? Oh, Anne says we have a customer satisfaction survey link in our signatures, and it is on our bounce back email on our main office email too. I love when I see that, Anne. I love seeing a customer satisfaction link embedded right in folks' emails. And a lot of times they say things like, we value your we value your feedback and we want it. And I always really appreciate that too. So, okay, I won't belabor the point. I'm going to move us ahead. If what I'm talking about has got you really excited, this idea of being the best organization you can be, and you're going, gosh, but I don't even know where to start, right? What would it look like for us to do that to the best of our ability? You can review best in class practices from fellow community action agencies. And one of the places that you can go is to the Community Action Standards of Excellence, which define optimal real world benchmarks that every community action agency can strive for. These are not pie in the sky. These are not theoretical. These are real practices that we know the best of the best community action agencies do. And we also adapt these from the Malcolm Baldrige criteria, which is a national quality award that awards quality or recognizes quality in sectors like the business sector and the for-profit sector and the nonprofit sector. Terry, we're seeing, yep, something else. Thank you. We're seeing the nonprofit sector, education, so on and so forth. So check out the Standards of Excellence if you want some inspiration. And really what that enables you to do is go from compliance to excellence, which is on the next slide. We have a tripartite board. Great, you met the standard, but that's very different than we have a board that is intentionally recruited with the skills we need that reflects our community and centers lived experience, right? We do that biannual risk assessment. Well, we do an annual risk assessment that informs our improvement plans, right? And is tracked in our agency-wide scorecard. So it enables you to move beyond just checking the box. And how you build this capacity is really through a process called continuous quality improvement, CQI. My CQI nerds in the room are probably cheering right now. Yeah, on the next slide. How you do that is by tracking your progress throughout the year, having regular touch points to not just collect the data, but to look at the data, to compare your results and identify opportunities where you could improve, and then to actually try that thing out, run the experiment. If I do this little thing, can I improve my performance? And over time, as you build that muscle, you get better and better and better at getting better, which is awesome. And so a couple other points about all of this. Another way for you to build your capacity is to fold it in. You've already gotten the point. Make sure your standards are just, the requirements of your standards are just built into the way that you do business. And another way to reframe or how to build your capacity is to reframe the standards as external requirements that are check the box versus tools that help the agency stay healthy and effective. And maybe one more question for you. What are some ways that you think that you could ensure the standards are seen as more than compliance in your CAA? Well, the slide, yep, on the slide it says leadership communication, right? If the leader communicates that standards matter, that's one of the ways to reframe. Making sure that responsibility is not just your ED or not just your CSBG director or your planning director, that the standards belong to all of us, that you model that they matter, right? If you only ever talk about the standards when they're due, that models to everyone that the standards are only a compliance exercise, right? Celebrate when things go really, really well. Hey, we did a really good job here, and actually use the standards and talk about the good work that you're doing related to them. So those are some ways for you to elevate and reframe the standards out of just simply a compliance exercise. So I have promised you over and over again that we are going to show you some resources. And now is the part that I'm going to do that. typically, when we get to the resources section of a session, I watch the numbers of participants drop because everyone goes, I don't need the resources. I'll just look at them later. I'll encourage you and invite you to stay on with us to hear about some of these resources. I'll go quick. You will get the slides. You can check them out more in depth later. And also, friends, if you have questions, now is the time to be putting those into the chat so that Terry and I can be responsive to those. And I invite you, let's go ahead, try to stump us with a standard. Okay, so here is the NCAP website that has all of the tools and resources I'm about to talk about here. Michelle, you were asking about a good overview of the standards. Come to this website. We've got that nice brief history that talks about how this happened, how did we get here, and gives you an overview of the standards. Also on that website are some of our webinars about the organizational standards. Some of our webinars have been archived, friends. So if you're looking for something in particular and you're having trouble accessing it, or you bump into that password wall, just email Terry and I, and we'll get you what you're looking for. Okay. We also have some tools to help you assess, or help the state to assess compliance with the organizational standards, but agencies use the same tools that the state is going to use. It just makes it a whole lot simpler. Then you're both, using the same scorecard when you look at it, but you can come here to see some of the guidance that we give to states about how they can assess compliance with the organizational standards. I think the next slide is just some samples of what you will see in that template. And I actually think that kind of chart you see there is very helpful for, here are the things that have to be done annually. Here are the things that have to be done every 3 years, every 5 years, which I think we have another tool that does that as well. I'll show you that in a second. We do have a glossary of terms too on the next slide. If you're looking at something, you go, I don't know what the heck that means. You can come to our glossary and figure out what that term means. Here's the other tool I wanted to highlight is that calendar of required actions. So it does break down the standards by those that you have to do annually, those you have to do every 2 years, yada, yada, and some of the recommended documentation that we have, or some of the documentation we would recommend you use to document your compliance with the standards. Always, always, always check with your state because they ultimately determine what is acceptable documentation. Okay. Standard 4.3 is one that we commonly get questions about. And so we have this resource to help you with documenting your compliance with standard 4.3. We also have this calendar of activities that is specific to the board. As we talked about, some of those board standards are the common reasons that we miss standards. And in some cases, we just have a timing issue. So this helps to give you a breakdown of here are the things that have to happen with the board and when. For each one of the 9 categories, if you are jazzed up about this idea of not just, meeting the requirements, but understanding the intent of the standards and going beyond, you can check out our technical assistance guides for all of the categories. And they have all kinds of great stuff in there. Yeah, I think we already said this one. We think it's so important, we're giving it to you twice. So this next one is actually not on that website that I just shared, but we shared this with you yesterday, the CAP law tool for raising the low-income voice and those case studies and democratic selection procedures. We hear a lot of questions about what can that look like. This is a really nice resource from CAP law. Also, that joint tool that we did with CAP law on how to do board minutes. Really easy to copy and paste some of this text into your board minutes because it's really common things folks have to do. And just in general, friends, our colleagues, our sister organization at CAP Law has some of the best tools out there. So make sure that you go to their resource library and check them out and give them lots and lots and lots of love. And so we are coming to the very end. Terry, you haven't kicked me yet, so I guess that I'm still supposed to be talking, right? Okay, great. Yeah, like Terry said, it's like we planned this or something, right? I know what slides I'm doing. So when it comes to closing out, some of our last advice for all of you, number one, build up those core practices, documenting, engaging your leadership team, communicating, all of that good stuff. If you focus on those core practices, you're going to build your capacity to meet the standards today and into the future. Document, document, document. I don't know how many times we said to document. Make sure you've got a good system for managing that documentation. Get that documentation before the elves get it, right? Collaboration is key. The standards don't belong to just one person. They're all of our jobs. The other thing is support is available. Friends, if you are stuck, don't suffer alone. Don't suffer in silence. Call your colleagues, call your state association, call your state office, call us. We are here to help. And we really encourage you to not just get complacent and say compliance is enough, but be the best organization you can be. So with that, I'm really excited that no one left while I talked about the resources. I don't have to talk to my therapist later about how people left during the session. I feel really good about that. Thank you. Um, so Terry and I do want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your participation, your collaboration over the last couple days. I know that it was a lot, but I hope that you got some really good things out of this. I hope you learned a couple things. If you did, we'd love to hear what you learned. Shoot us a line, put it in the chat. Is there anything else anyone wants to lift up before we wrap for the day? I like to see thank yous. That's great. Terry, anything you want to say?
No, I really appreciate y'all being so supportive of me while Mary Beth was not available this earlier today. So you guys were great. I've really enjoyed interacting with you, and let me know the next time I can come and present at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, yes. We want to come see you in person next time, for sure. So, Sabrina, I think we're going to pass it back to you to wrap us up. Thank you.
Awesome. I wanted to say thanks everyone for joining today. Following the presentation, you will receive a follow-up email with links to access the presentation materials and a survey link for you to leave any comments about the session and what advocacy topics you would like to hear more about in the future. A special thank you to Mary Beth and Terry. Thank you again for doing the CSBG Organizational Standards training.
Sabrina, there's a question in the chat. Where can we access the recording for future reference?
On WISCAP's page, we will have that posted on under the trainings link. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Well, that'll also be in the email as well that will follow up with the survey. So there'll be a link for that. So, and we'll send that to all the attendees. So, but if you do need it and didn't get it, reach out to Sabrina or I, and we'd be happy to share that.
Thank you, friends. Take care.
Bye, everyone.